In most cases, when great men and women pass away, the details of their lives, what they supposedly did and didn't say or do, seem to continue growing and changing. And as their afterlives do a sharp turn from provable reality to legend, one is suddenly overwhelmed with kiss-and-tell nonsense, various triumphs of the human spirit moments, and other hero-making constructs that turn a life dedicated to science or sport or God knows what into a blockbuster money-making machine. The same fate befalls the chess greats, which takes a genius's colorful life, milks the highs and the lows until it's all dried up, and then adds outrageous tales that are so far out there that one is left wondering what's true and what's fiction. And in many cases, the fiction is so much fun that we all smile, give a yes, yes, I know it's not possible wink, and then embrace it. But at times, unsavory stories appear that have no historic validation and no charm at all. And once someone mentions it, other sources rush to repeat the tale, adding on more and more literary detritus with every retelling. A great example of an out-of-control, truth-blending with fiction melting pot can be seen in the various biographies of Johannes Zukertort, who was one of the 2 or 3 best chess players in the world during the 1870s and 80s. In his case, he apparently decided to mold his own story into something that he approved of. Zukertort claimed that he received a medical degree in 1866 at the University of Breslau, served in the German Medical Corps in 1866 for the German Army. He fought in many battles, including the Franco-Prussian War of 1870-71, and was awarded several medals. He was an accomplished swordsman, and he was highly skilled in games like dominoes, whist, and, of course, chess. And he also claimed that he was from aristocratic descent. His mother was a baroness, and that he was fluent in 14 languages. One is left wondering if he had a cape and could fly. Of course, some of it was undoubtedly true, and adding a tidbit or two could only add to his public persona. But these things do tell us a lot about the man's personality, and he went so far overboard that the let's make stuff up crowd was left silent, unable to top what Zukertort himself created. In this lecture, we're going to take a quick look at the lives and games of 4 of the greatest attacking geniuses of all time. 3 of the 4 were world champions, while the other lived at a time when there wasn't any official world championship title, though he was considered to be head and shoulders above everyone else. In chess, there is no greater legend than Paul Morphy. Born to a wealthy family in 1837 in New Orleans, he learned how to move the pieces at the age of 8, quickly became one of the best players in New Orleans by the age of 9, and was a strong master by 12. After gaining the highest possible honors in the University of Louisiana, he got his law degree at 20. However, he was too young to practice law, so he decided to play chess for a while. And with that decision, the world was his. He went to New York and dominated everyone that was put in front of him. It didn't take long for the chess masters to realize that he was the best player in the United States. There followed a tour of Europe where he played matches against almost all the world's best, crushing them with incredible ease. And in what seemed like the blink of an eye, it quickly became clear that he was not only the best player in the world, but also the best player who ever lived. By 1858, at the age of 21, Morphy was the talk of all Europe. If there was a royal party, Morphy was invited. Dukes, counts, barons, world leaders, and everyone of note did their best to meet him. It wasn't just his play that made him so popular. Morphy was a true gentleman, well-dressed, always polite. And when he was given prize money for victories in his various matches, he would often give it to future opponents to help them with travel costs, or use the money to help a defeated opponent in some other way. The Lowenthal-Morphy match in 1858 had a 100-pound prize, which in those days was a very large sum. After Morphy won the match, he took the money and bought a set of high-quality furniture, which was worth more than the 100 pounds he won, for his opponent's family. After conquering Europe, Morphy returned to the United States in 1859, and by 1860, he had given up competitive chess entirely. Done. Finished. He came, he saw, he quickly conquered, and that was that. Sometime around his 38th birthday, Morphy began to exhibit signs of dementia, and on the afternoon of July 10th, 1884, at the age of 47, he died of a stroke. Comparisons are often made between Morphy and Bobby Fischer. Both were Americans. Both reached the highest levels in chess. Both were viewed as the best players in the world. Both left the game after achieving their goal of world chess domination, and both suffered from serious mental illness. Though it is a bit odd that America's two greatest players suffered from some form of mental disabilities, they were very different people. Morphy was extremely well educated. Fischer never made it out of high school. Morphy was from a wealthy family. Fischer grew up in poverty. Morphy was small in stature and frail. Fischer was tall, robust, and strong. Morphy was kind to others. Fischer feared that others were always trying to get things from him. Morphy was always polite, though who knows what he was really thinking. Fischer always said what was on his mind, allowing you to know exactly where he was coming from. What's remarkable about Morphy is that he only played competitive chess from mid-1857 to late 1859. During that small time frame, he conquered the chess world and he became one of the most famous men on earth. Though Morphy is known for his powerful attacking play, he was actually decades ahead of everyone else in other areas of the game. His main opponents were also attacking geniuses, and all of them had deep, scary tactical skills. What made him untouchable was a strategic know-how, which gave him the ability to build a powerful attack from strong positional roots. In our first example of Morphy's play, it's very clear that he completely dominated his opponents positionally. All of Morphy's pieces are on logical, active squares. Compare black's bishops to white's bishop on c1, which is completely entombed. Morphy's rooks are doubled on the e-file and ready to do damage. Morphy's queen is resting happily on that huge hole on d3. Morphy decided that he had to trade queens since it's clear which queen is better placed. So, queen a6, very logical move. Instead of trading queens, though, Morphy did something a little odd. He gave his queen away. Queen takes f3. A beautiful queen sacrifice that blasts open the white king's pawn structure. He took it. Rook to g6 check. The king has no choice. It has to move. And the bishop comes into h3. Now the threat is, let's say he plays, I don't know, d4. Would be bishop g2 check, king g1, bishop takes pawn, checkmate. So what he does is he moves his rook away so the king will have some place, and here we are, rook d1. And the attack continues. King g1, bishop takes f3 check, king f1, he checks again, and then once again he chases him into the corner. And now bishop takes f2. And you notice, though white's ahead material, what are white's pieces doing? The queen is off center. Their a2 rook here is doing nothing. The bishop doesn't even exist, and this rook's doing nothing. And look at black's pieces. The rook's on an open file. This other rook's on an open file. Both bishops are in the face of the king. So who's really ahead in material? Black. Black's pieces are far more valuable. Now the threat is bishop to g2 mate. So the guy has to do something really fast. So he rushes back with his queen to give it away. He takes the queen, rook takes, and now he brings his rook deep into the game. White can't move anything, so he goes back with his rook, and now rook h6, and now what he's doing is he's taking aim at h2. This rook potentially hits h2, this rook potentially hits h2. And suddenly, mate is in the cards. d4, notice how this bishop finally is doing something. It hits the rook, but it's too late. Bishop e3. And white gave up, since after bishop takes e3, mate will occur with rook on h to h2 check. The king has to move, and checkmate. Our next attacking genius is Alexander Alekhine. Born in Moscow in 1892 to a wealthy, aristocratic family, he learned how to play when he was 6 or 7 years old. In a long match in 1927, at the age of 35, Alekhine defeated the Cuban genius Capablanca, who was the 3rd official world chess champion and was considered to be unbeatable, thus becoming the 4th official world chess champ. Unlike our other 3 attackers, all of whom were super talents that took the chess world by storm at a very young age, Alekhine got good the old-fashioned way. He studied hard. He lost a lot of games, but treated them as learning tools, and bit by bit raised his level until he reached the highest possible heights. Alekhine's life wasn't easy. In fact, revolutions and wars seemed to appear in one wave after another. Russia's defeat in the Russo-Japanese War in 1904 and 1905, the Russian Revolution of 1905, World War I, the dismantling of the Tsarist autocracy in 1917, after which he fled to Germany and France, and World War II. This final war and alcoholism finished him off, and he died in abject poverty in Estoril, Portugal in 1946. He's the only world chess champion to die with the title. Of course, with all these battles occurring all around him, his life was full of adventure and misadventure. Alexander Alekhine survived imprisonment by the Germans in 1914. He again survived imprisonment and a death sentence in 1918 Russia. He survived 2 world wars, and he survived the Nazis. Yet he traveled the world, had avid fans rushing to greet him in every city he visited, and was idolized as a chess god when he won the world championship. All these things, though, had to take a toll. In 1922, a few years after he fled Russia, Alekhine had a subpar result in an important tournament. He was lonely, as many expats are. Depressed, he thought the bad result might have ended his dream of winning the world championship. And the stress of all those hard years suddenly caught up with him. Sitting at the dinner table with one of his few friends, he grabbed a butter knife and stabbed himself. If he had died, his greatest moments would have never happened. Fortunately, Alekhine survived and went on to become one of the all-time greats, and perhaps the most creative player ever. At his best, Alekhine's games featured stunning tactical conceptions that have never been equaled. Alekhine himself had this to say: "Chess for me is not a game, but an art. Yes, and I take upon myself all those responsibilities which an art imposes on its adherents." In Morphy's time, there wasn't an official world championship. But in Alekhine's day, the world championship was a very big deal, with several extremely strong players aggressively vying to challenge whomever held the title. This often led to him butting heads when they came into contact in tournaments. One of his competitors was the Russian Efim Bogolyubov, who lost 2 world championship matches to Alekhine. At times they were friends, and at other times enemies. After one tournament concluded and the award ceremony began, Alekhine found himself on the podium. Instead of doing the usual thank you routine, he said the following: "Last night, I had a dream. I had died and found myself at the pearly gates, but when I tried to enter, I was told by St. Peter that chess players were not allowed into heaven. I wandered along the endless fence, hoping to find some other entry point, but it was hopeless. Then suddenly, I saw Bogolyubov on the other side having a great time. I rushed back to St. Peter and said, 'You told me that chess players aren't allowed in heaven. But if that is so, why was Bogolyubov allowed in?' St. Peter replied, 'Oh, he only thinks he's a chess player.'" Alekhine was a very complex man, with just about everyone viewing him in a different way. He could be harsh one day, incredibly friendly the next. I personally have a very simple way to judge people. If they love animals, they're all right by me. So when I happened upon a photo of Alekhine and his cat, whose name, by the way, was Chess, I was immediately won over. One tale has it that Alekhine was trying to cross the Polish border, only to find that he had misplaced his passport. When the border guards refused to let him enter, he looked at them in an intense fashion and said, "I am Alekhine, chess champion of the world. I have a cat called chess. I do not need papers." Looking back, it's clear that Alekhine changed the face of chess by incorporating all the things modern professionals do today. Deep opening preparation, world-class skills in every phase of the game, psychological preparation, physical preparation, and a deep study of the strengths and weaknesses of each of his opponents. The genie was out of the bottle, and the age of chess innocence was gone. Others had to embrace his work ethic and universal skills, or they simply wouldn't succeed. One of Alekhine's biggest fans is the 13th world champion, Garry Kasparov, who studied Alekhine's games as a child, and once he saw their brilliance, patterned his own play after his chess hero. Here are two of his quotes. "Alekhine's attacks came suddenly, like destructive thunderstorms that erupted from a clear sky." And, "Who else in chess history has won so many serious games with the help of brilliant tactical strokes?" Indeed, Alekhine's tactics were everywhere. Sometimes they were so deep that even other grandmasters muttered in awe, knowing they would never be able to emulate him. But almost all of his tactical shots, super complex or very basic, were based on the very patterns you've already learned. Here's an example of Alekhine's incredible depth of vision. A lot of Alekhine's games are only for very high-rated players, but this one, everyone can kind of grok it. It was played in a military hospital. Alekhine was blindfolded, battling against several sighted opponents at the same time. Starts out, Alekhine's white with e4, e6, that's the French defense, d4, d5. And these are normal moves. Black had attacked white's pawn, white develops a piece and guards it at the same time. Knight f6, white took, not a particularly good move, but you just do all sorts of crazy stuff when you're blindfold playing weak players. So black took it back, and now white goes on this extravagant little journey. He's trying to induce weaknesses in the enemy camp. And so after knight e4, the guy immediately lashes out and goes f5. But there's a problem with f5. It does chase the knight away, but it creates a gaping hole on the e5 square. So Alekhine continues further, a little bit of aggressive whimsy. He's going to eventually probably bring the knight back and then jump into this square, that nice hole that he was given. Don't forget, he's blindfolded. His opponent, who can see, plays bishop e7, threatening the knight. The knight retreats back. And now, so far, black's played okay. But he plays c6. And this is a very passive move. He blocks the square from his own knight, and he really doesn't achieve anything at all. Alekhine leaps into the square. His opponent castles, and then he leaps again with the other knight, really grabbing hold of that square and developing a piece. And black plays b6. Now, b6 is actually a pretty good-looking move for the most part, but here it isn't particularly good. It fails. Probably a much better move would be to start immediate action and pretend he didn't play that horrible move and just attack the center with c5. But he didn't do that. So, after knight f3, he played b6, and of course, white keeps developing. You notice Alekhine is a master attacker, but he doesn't just go at you right away. Really great players develop all their pieces, and so before he goes for the death blow, he wants all his pieces out. So after bishop d3, bishop b7, his king is now safe. He castles, and he's ready to hunt for bear. Black plays rook e8. Alekhine gains space and attacks the enemy knight. And the knight retreats, and Alekhine does one more developing move. Now everybody's primed, his whole army's doing pretty well. Knight bd7, gets his queen ready for something really special, and black, which He doesn't see it at all, plays c5. The right idea, wrong time. And now the blindfolded player plays brilliantly. He crams his knight right into the enemy position, taking nothing and just hanging it in midair. By doing that, he now threatens to take this pawn with his queen. So the guy has to take it. So he did. And then Alekhine really went crazy, and he went queen takes pawn check, giving his queen away too. The problem is, if his opponent takes it, then knight g5 is mate, right in the middle of the board, pulling the king out of its safety zone to its death. So the guy had to run for his life. King f8 doesn't really work because after knight g5, there's going to be a mate here. So off he went to the races, king g6. And now there's a lot of mates. But amazingly, Alekhine actually found the fastest mate. And usually when you're blindfold, you just look for any old mate. But Alekhine wanted it to be perfect. And by doing this, he not only attacks his pawn again, but he actually stops the king from stepping on the square. And so g4, the perfect move. His opponent plays bishop e4 and knight h4 mate. End of game. A brilliant game by a blindfolded player. After Alekhine's death, every world champion from 1948, when Mikhail Botvinnik won the title in a match tournament, up to 1972, when Boris Spassky lost the title to Bobby Fischer, was a product of the Soviet system. The top Soviet players were given trainers, an apartment, and all expenses for home and abroad, which left all the other players in the world who had to fend for themselves in a deep hole. When Botvinnik became world champion, his scientific, logical, very rational style was emulated. Of course, each player had his own style, but well-rounded skills were the base from which those individual styles could grow. And with a couple of odd exceptions, chess as science dominated the top players' mentality until something incredible occurred in the late 50s. Mikhail Tal hit the scene. Here was a player who saw sequences of moves as if they were flowing water, much as the great composers saw musical sequences. His vision, his creativity, his aggression, mixed with his ability to calculate quickly and accurately, helped him tear apart all his fellow grandmasters in exhibitions of raw chessic violence. At first, his chess was thought to be incorrect, and the pundits insisted that once Tal's opponents got used to his tricks, everyone would return to normal. But he kept winning, and when he earned a match against Botvinnik in 1960, Tal took the world championship title by storm, beating Botvinnik decisively with a 12.5, 8.5 score. 6 wins for Tal, 2 losses, and 13 draws. Tal, at just 23 years of age, became the youngest world champion. I met Tal and took him to Disneyland in 1988. He was an incredibly kind man, very funny, full of energy, but his health was ravaged by years of heavy drinking and smoking. He died in 1992 at the age of 55. As is so common with artists, they often live amazing lives but fail to take care of themselves. I've seen this in many artistic, creative men who seem at a loss when it comes to daily life. Tal's first wife, Sally Landau, in a biography she wrote about her late husband in 2003, said, "Misha was so ill-equipped for living. When he traveled to a tournament, he couldn't pack his own suitcase. He didn't even know how to turn on the gas for cooking." Personally, if I had to choose between genius and practicality, I'd go with genius every time. But the world wouldn't spin without practicality. Here's a game of Tal's played when he was 19 years old. It's not a game that you need to understand since, in some ways, it's a game from Mars. It's a game of raw ferocity, never-ending tactics, and a kind of energy that completely engulfs the opponent. In a way, it's art. You don't have to know exactly what's going on to be entranced by it, but there will be lessons to learn, and I'll highlight those moments. This particular position looks totally normal. what I want you to do is simply look at the brutal stuff that occurs. You don't have to look at variations. We don't have to discuss it. I just want you to marvel at what seems like a quiet position turn into a nuclear explosion. You notice the one thing is white's king is in the middle, black's isn't, and Tal decides to jump on it. D5, sacrificing material to open the center. And from here on, the fun starts. He takes, white takes a pawn, and now black goes berserk. Knight c6, giving away a knight. His opponent, not knowing what in the world's going on, takes that too and thanks him. Rook e8, hitting the bishop. The bishop's pinned, so the king moves, guarding it. And he gives away his rook. So far, he's given away the rook and the knight. He doesn't take it for various very difficult reasons. And instead, he says, you know, I don't want to bring my king into the middle, and so I'm going to bring my rook, guard my knight, and see if I can survive this. And Tal gives away more pieces. Here, take my knight. So the guy has to take it. And now he takes this back, and now he has this scary diagonal check once he moves that rook. So his opponent takes that, has to get rid of it. The queen now is the one doing the scary diagonal check, and white comes to the center saying, let's trade queens. I'm a piece up, I win. Let's trade queens. And what does Tal do? He gives away his other rook. King takes e2, bishop takes g4, check, king e1, rook e8 check, bishop e2, and now he gives away his final rook. And his opponent resigned, since if he goes king f1, that's mate, and if he takes it with the knight, nothing is guarding the queen, and Tal would take the queen, and now he's the one with the material, and so his opponent resigned. After Fischer refused to defend his title and quit chess, the Soviet Union reclaimed what was theirs. Anatoly Karpov, a brilliant positional player, was the 12th official world champion, and Garry Kasparov, our next subject, took the title from Karpov in 1985. He was only 22 years old, beating Tal's record of 23. Kasparov was born in 1963, and his style mixed the most profound opening preparation ever seen with attacking skills that reminded one of Alekhine and Tal. In fact, many people consider him to be the greatest player of all time. After losing his title to Vladimir Kramnik in 2000, he remained the world's top-rated player until his retirement in 2005. He devoted himself to Russian politics, and he's an outspoken enemy of Vladimir Putin. Kasparov was presented with the Morris B. Abram Human Rights Award, UN Watch's annual Human Rights Prize, in 2013. The organization praised him as not only one of the world's smartest men, but also among its bravest. The game we are going to look at shows what can happen to you if you leave your king in the center for too long. It's a bad idea against anyone, but if you're playing Kasparov, then it's likely going to be fatal. Like Tal, Kasparov had a way about somehow pushing his opponents right off the board. So treat this as just a chess movie and enjoy the blood-curdling brutality. Kasparov decides to go all out. He sacrifices a pawn. They capture it. Bishop takes. He now brings his bishop here, pinning the knight and attacking this bishop. So the guy counters with this way. You'd think he'd move the bishop, but no, instead he gives up this bishop and attacks the queen. He takes it, and by doing that, he's able to take this knight and force the king to move in the middle, which he does, and suddenly the king's in the middle, just what Kasparov dreams of. King c7, and he brings his final piece into the game. These guys always used all their army. Bishop d6, rook f5, hitting the queen and the pawn. Queen c4, rook e4, queen b5. He's coming to get him. Look at those rooks, incredibly deep into the enemy position. Rook d8, he's just groveling at this point. He doesn't know what hit him. c4, chasing the queen away. And now the last piece, knight e5. He can't take it because that would allow the queen to die. And so he retreats one last pathetic time, queen b1. And the problem is that the threat is simply to take this pawn. So the game might end bishop c7, rook takes check, bishop takes, queen takes, just horrific. You can find more games by these four great attackers online or in various books. And in a never-ending effort to sate your attacking thirst, I hope you explore the lives and games of other legends. I give a few more in later lectures, and you can pad that with the players from the old days like Rudolf Spielmann, Frank Marshall, and modern chess daredevils like David Bronstein, Effen Geller, and Alexei Shirov, who is still going strong today.